By May 1945, the shattered remains of Europe's cities mirrored a total collapse of the pre-war order. In this chaotic environment of ruin and rage, traitor became the single deadliest label a person could carry. While the high-profile legalism of the Nuremberg trials dominated international headlines, the actual process of dealing with collaborators in the streets and prison courtyards followed a much different set of rules. For those who turned against their neighbors or their governments, the end was rarely defined by clinical courtroom procedures. Instead, their deaths were marked by chaos, humiliation, and a vengeance that sought to reach beyond the grave. A formal peace treaty could stop the movement of armies, but it did little to ease the collective demand for accountability. In the wake of total war, many felt the scales could only be balanced through the visible and physical elimination of the accused. Even in state-sanctioned executions, the process was often clumsy and physically degrading. When William Joyce, the American-born voice of Nazi radio, was led to the gallows, the force of the drop ripped his facial scar wide open. It was a violent end to a capture that had been equally undignified. Joyce was shot through the buttocks by British soldiers, who had recognized his voice near the German border. In Romania, the execution of dictator Ion Antonescu became a display of gruesome inefficiency. After aligning his country with Hitler and overseeing mass atrocities, he was handed over to a firing squad in 1946. The first volley of shots only wounded the men. Antonescu and his collaborators were left screaming on the ground, requiring executioners to step forward and fire multiple shots to finish the task. In France, the former head of the collaborationist Vichy government, Pierre Laval, attempted to avoid execution by swallowing a cyanide capsule hidden in his jacket. The poison had expired, failing to kill him. Instead, Laval endured the indignity of having his stomach pumped by prison doctors before being dragged out, tied to a chair, and shot in the back. This method of execution, being bound to a chair, was also used against Galeazzo Ciano, Mussolini's own son-in-law, after he joined the council that voted to depose the Italian dictator. Charged with treason by Mussolini's new puppet regime, Ciano was forced to sit backwards in his chair as a firing squad shot him in the back, a humiliation that was deliberately filmed by his executioners. These specific executions moved past the protocols of legal justice, prioritizing the physical degradation of the prisoner as a final response to their crimes. For governments dealing with high-ranking traitors, simply ending a life was sometimes insufficient. The goal was to erase the individual from history entirely. Following the failed attempt on Hitler's life at the Wolf's Lair, General Henning von Tresckow committed suicide by detonating a grenade under his chin to protect his family from reprisal. He was initially buried at his family estate. Co-conspirator Claus von Stauffenberg was executed in this Berlin courtyard and buried with his medals. But the SS later exhumed both men, stripped their insignia, burned their bodies, and scattered the ashes to ensure no gravesite could ever exist. The same fate awaited Chinese collaborator Wang Jingwei. After he died of illness in Japan, his body was returned to Nanjing for a state funeral. But as soon as the war ended, the new government used explosives to open his tomb and burned his remains. By destroying the physical body, the state removed the possibility of these men ever becoming martyrs, ensuring that the legacy of their betrayal remained tied to their destruction rather than a monument. While many collaborators were handled in the immediate post-war chaos, others successfully vanished. But for some, the passage of decades provided no protection from those determined to see them punished. Herberts Kukers, a Latvian collaborator responsible for the deaths of thousands in Riga, fled to Brazil after the war. He lived openly in São Paulo for nearly 20 years, operating a scenic flight business under his own name. His life changed in 1964, when his true identity was confirmed. This discovery triggered a Mossad operation that ignored international borders to track him down. Disguised agents gained his confidence, eventually luring him to Uruguay with the promise of a business investment. They invited him to a remote villa, where Kukers believed he was meeting with new partners. Instead, he was ambushed by a hit team. After a violent struggle that left Kukers with a shattered skull and multiple gunshot wounds, his body was left in a trunk with a note detailing his crimes. This pursuit of cougars across the Atlantic, decades after the war's end, illustrates the reach of those who refused to consider the case of betrayal closed, regardless of the years that had passed. From the covert ambushes in Uruguay to the high-security prisons of Moscow, the pursuit of collaborators was persistent. When Red Army General Andrey Vlasov was captured after leading a Nazi-backed army against Stalin, his execution was designed for maximum suffering, as he was slowly strangled to death over several minutes. Whether the methods involved firing squads, electric chairs, or secret assassinations, the goal was the same: the total annihilation of those who had switched sides during the conflict. This legacy blurred the line between objective legal justice and raw human vengeance. While the official record often highlights the major trials, the timeline of retribution splintered across the decades, following threads that didn't reach their conclusion until the 1960s or even the 1980s. For the millions of victims and their grieving survivors, the war did not truly end with a single signature in 1945. It ended incrementally, as the last accounts of betrayal were settled one by one. In the aftermath of total war, treason leaves a permanent mark, a stain that neither the passage of time nor the protocols of the law can ever truly remove.